Good morning everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Now, this little bit of a beginning spiel I've been doing every day, and I know that my regulars will have seen it every day, but I know that new viewers catch these videos too, so I'm going to go over it again. We shop every 6 to 8 weeks, and we travel to do so, and because of that, there is 7 to 10 days post the groceries that require food prep, preservation, freezing, meal making, and all that sort of thing. One of the biggest questions I ever get when I say that I shop every 6 to 8 weeks for 8 of us is, how do you make it last? Now, of course, fresh fruit and veg is not going to last 6 to 8 weeks unless I had a proper root cellar or a cool room or something, which I don't. So what I have to do is I have to preserve and process it in such a way that we're still eating all of that food throughout the 6 weeks, just not necessarily fresh. We still get all the nutrients and goodness and have the choices and the variety, but it's just not straight out of the fridge fresh. So what I started doing a few trips back was doing these like daily videos post the grocery trip to show how I was using each of the items that I bought, and everyone really enjoys them. So I've kept on doing them. I try and do them most months. I don't always make it. It just depends on the month. This month is a little all over the place because we've got an issue with the secondary fridge that we use for produce and an issue with an inverter. I've just ordered a replacement inverter and we might be able to fix this one, but we need a replacement while we've got it disconnected, trying to pull it apart. The fridge has been a no-go. I can order a new thermostat to try, but other than that, nothing has worked. So the fridge is still not working, and I'm still trying to make a decision on what I do there, whether I spend money on another one. There's a hesitancy to buy a second-hand fridge because of power usage. The newer the fridge, the lower the power it uses, and you know what it's going to use, whereas you're buying a second-hand one, you don't know if there's been damage, or if it's too old, then it's got different power. There's some big toss-ups when you're off-grid for power for fridges and stuff, especially when you have multiple like we do. So all still in progress has made this month a little bit cluttered. So these videos that I'm putting out are a few days behind. Normally I try and put them out the day after it happens, but it means that I'm coming back to do these voiceovers a few days behind, and sometimes it's going to make it a little bit of difference to the voiceovers. And I can sometimes not remember what I did until I write my notes and then use my notes to do the voiceovers. So bear with me. But this is, I think it works out as day 5 or 6, I'm lost track, of food prep, and we're working on more chicken. We canned some soup and things like that. So join me to see what I got done on this day, and I will see you at the end of the video, and then we will see where we go. Alrighty, so we had chicken to process. Now, when I buy the chicken, I try and grab the chicken with the longest use by date on it out of the fridge. And then I tend to mark down, quite often with a whiteboard marker on my fridge, the dates, like what needs to be used first. So I always say that we have to use the mince first because that's what needs using first. And then generally speaking, it's chicken, and then it's generally pork, and then it's beef. That's generally how the dates go, and the use of meat is required. So one thing I dislike about freezing chicken raw is the effort to then cook it. So I have a tendency to cook all of my chicken before it gets frozen, because if I freeze it raw, I have to remember to pull it out. I don't like quick defrosting raw chicken, but I don't mind quick defrosting cooked chicken because you're then just heating it through. It doesn't worry me, but I'm not a fan of quick defrosting raw chicken, and so I tend not to do that. So the other thing too is that if you're close to use by date on a chicken, like these chicken thighs were close to use by date, I think they had a couple of days left, but if they're close to use by date, then by cooking it all off, you've got a few extra days in the fridge before you have to get it in the freezer. And at the moment my freezers are pretty chock-a-block because of the lack of that fridge, so we've got a bit more produce in the freezers than normal and things like that. So it gives me a couple of days more grace to try and organize the fridges and freezers in a manner that's going to work. So I generally speaking, other than a couple of serves of breasts, which I fillet and freeze or dice and freeze for meals that I really just prefer breast meat and prefer cooking up when I do it, green chicken curry and some soups that I make that I don't can, like there's a lemon coconut soup that we really like, that I like fresh chicken for, things like that. Or sometimes some sort of crumbed or breaded chicken is always nicer with a fresh chicken, like raw chicken than trying to do it with cooked chicken. So I normally freeze a couple of serves of the breast chicken for that, but the rest of it gets cooked up. So today I had two trays of thighs that needed working. Now, I like to marinate my chicken thighs. Last month I made the phrase, I like to marinate my thighs, and everyone really enjoyed giving me crap about it. So this month I am adding an extra word there, and I will try and remember in future that I like to marinate my chicken thighs. So I like to marinate my chicken thighs before cooking them and then freezing them. I basically use the same recipe as my sweet rub, except I don't add sugar to it. So it's, it's smoked paprika, it's garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper, mustard powder, and then I add cowboy candy, so there's my sweet hit in it, and I also add lemon juice and olive oil because we want a bit of moisture in it while we're frying it off. So it's a wet rub rather than a dry rub, basically. Then fry it all off. So I sliced it into pieces before I cooked it. That's purely for ease of cooking. If you're cooking whole thighs, it sometimes can be hard to tell whether the whole thigh is cooked all the way through. And whilst we don't eat this cold, we tend to reheat it before we eat it. You still want it fairly well. You still want it well cooked, because if someone does eat it straight out of the packet, then you want it to be safe. So by cutting it into strips, there's more surface area to pick up the marinade for a start, but it cooks easier. It's easier to tell when it's cooked, and it cooks quicker and things like that. So, and when doing these trays are 2.2 kilos each, I think, so 4.4 kilos, or what's that, like almost 10 pound, 9 pound of chicken, then you want to do it fairly quick. So I called Darryl out to cook it for me while I was doing other stuff. So he cooked it all off in the cast iron pan. You want to do it in batches. The whole idea of doing it in this nice hot cast iron pan too is that the sugars in the cowboy candy sort of caramelize around the chicken. If you overload the pan, it won't do that. They sort of stew in their own juices rather than creating that caramelized exterior. So Darryl had both pans going and was doing those for me, cooking it all off. And then that means we can have some for breakfast, and once it's cooled down, it can just go in the fridge and I can deal with it later. I don't have to deal with it straight away. While Darryl was cooking all the chicken off, I did breakfast. I didn't film it, but I filmed it plenty of times. You've seen it all before. I made okonomiyaki for breakfast, which is a Japanese cabbage pancake. So it's basically a vegetable fritter, basically. I shredded all the cabbage up, and then I put some soy sauce on it, which is, I suppose, the Japanese aspect of it. And then there's some eggs, water, and flour, bit of salt and pepper. And then mix it all through, and I sort of start with a base ratio, and then add a bit more flour or water if needed to get it to the right texture. And sometimes there's shredded carrot in it, or some other greens, or whatever we have, but today it was just cabbage. Mix it all up, and then we cook it off. So once he'd finished with the pans, then we scraped them all out, cleaned them all up, and then we cooked off the okonomiyaki. So I use about a half cup serve, I think, and I just put it in the middle of the pan, spread it out into a circle, and then fry it off. So you can cook it off with if you put a bit of fat in it, the outside of it goes kind of crispy. If you don't put a bit of fat in it, it's sort of soft. If you have nice high heat, it ends up sort of having like black, like charcoaly bits on the outside. If you don't, it doesn't. It's purely preference how you want to eat it, whether you wanted a nice soft pancake, whether you want the cabbage to be really soft, or whether you want it to have a crunch. So it's up to you how long you cook it for and what temperature. But I tend to like to have a little bit of colour on the outside of it, and I like the cabbage in the middle to be still a little bit crunchy, I suppose. I like that texture difference. We serve it up with some of the marinated chicken, and then we put a drizzle of the ABC sauce, which is the Kikatmanis, the sweet soy sauce. Christine actually sent me a recipe, or a video of a recipe, to make my own ABC sauce, so I'm definitely going to give that a go at some point. I had to buy a few ingredients to do it, but we go through this fair bit. The kids really like it on their fried rice and stuff as well. Anyway, so, and then some mayo. Normally you would use Kewpie mayo, the Japanese mayo, which is a slightly savoury mayo, but I stopped buying it because this was the purpose we used it for, this and sushi type meals, and realistically it's just unnecessary. We have plenty of homemade mayo, and it was something that I'd buy it was sort of gimmicky, and I'm trying to avoid buying things for one meal. I try and buy things that can be turned into multiple things. After breakfast or lunch or whatever you want to call it, I cut up the rest of the smoked chicken breast to use in a smoked chicken soup for canning. So I had used a few of the smoked chicken breasts in the pesto pasta last night, I think it was, or the night before, and left some aside purposely to make this smoked chicken soup. So there was 5 breasts, which I split between 6 jars. I just diced it all up into small pieces. I also diced up a whole lot of potato, a whole lot of carrot, onion. I forgot to do celery. I'm not sure why. There is some in the fridge, but that's fine. And then I used minced garlic rather than my fresh garlic because it's going in a jar. It really just doesn't need to be the fresh garlic. And some of my chicken stock paste, and I layered the jars up. So between the 6 jars, I put the 5 breasts between the 6 jars, and then layered up the vegetables. So I take the vegetables to sort of a 2-inch, 2.5-inch headspace, because some of the vegetables are going to swell and change size, and then top it all up. So I put the chicken stock paste right on the top of the jars, and then I fill them up with hot water from the kettle, and that will dissolve make the chicken stock permeate. But when it's cooking, it'll permeate anyway. And then you need to debubble them well, because there's lots of those cubes of vegetables which are going to allow for air pockets. So you need to get in there and debubble it really well. And then you top up the water as needed. So the water needs a 1.5-inch headspace. As I said, the vegetables and stuff are going to change size, and that as it cooks. You can cook the soups before putting them in the jars, and then you're not going to have as much change in the texture or the viscosity or anything of the soup as it's in the jar, but that's a lot of work. I really like raw pack canning. I just find it so simple to layer this all up in the jar and then just pour the hot water over the top. I do prefer to put hot stock over, but I am having issues with getting bones, chicken, like bone-in chicken at the moment. It's really expensive, so I don't have a whole lot of bones to make stock out of. When I get the half a cow that I'm hoping to get sometime next month maybe, I'll have a whole lot of beef bones, and I'll probably make a whole lot of beef stock and can it, and then I can use that, or I can make I'll probably make a whole bunch of soups with the beef, with the stock that I make from the beef kind of thing. So it's going to be a lot of work when I do it though, so you're going to have to try and time that appropriately, that it's not right when I do my grocery shop, and see how we go. We'll get to that when we get to that. So all the normal things. You need to clean the rims really well with white vinegar, lint-free cloth, and then I put the rubber rings on, because these are Fowler's Vicola jars, so they have the rubber rings, and I wipe the rubber rings down with vinegar as well. I also like to wipe the inside of my stainless steel lids with white vinegar. This is all a little bit of overkill, but at the same time, I live off-grid, outdoor kitchen. There's dust and dirt and sand, and I have lidded containers for all my rings and for the lids and all that sort of stuff, but it's a dusty environment. I'm not going to say it's dirty, because it's not, because I keep my kitchen pretty pristine, other than the floors, because it's a deck and that's really hard to keep clean. But we don't do 5-second rules here. But the actual surface of my kitchen and my utensils and everything are kept pristine. So, anyway, lids on and then clips on. Now, I can fit 7 of these 36s, which are a 1200ml jar, in my buffalo canner. So I did 6 with the smoked chicken soup, and then I did some extras with all the vegetables that were left over. I can only fit 7 in the buffalo, so I put 7 in there, and then the rest I will do later. Now, I put my clips on my jars. I use 2 clips on my jars. Fowler's Vicola does not recommend their jars for pressure canning for a start, but they also have guidelines to state a single clip on their jars. I use them pressure canning, have never had a problem. I know a lot of people who do. That's fine. The thickness of the jars is, they're a really thick jar compared to a lot of other jars. I have no problems whatsoever using a pressure canning. I use 2 clips because all of my gear is secondhand, and you can see that my clips are always dirty, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't come into contact with food or anything else. It's fine. I could scrub them up. It's a lot of time to scrub them up. But it also means that I can't see any numbers on my clips. And there is some clips that are similar size, but slightly varied. Like there's 4-inch clips is what I require for these 36 jars. But there is 4.25-inch clips, and I do own a couple of jars that use those. And there's glass 4-inch clips, which have a slightly different shape to them as well. I don't I can't tell by eyeballing them. So I use 2 clips because not all my clips fit the same. So that's a personal preference, and I'm just putting a disclaimer in there because I do get pulled up on it a lot. I choose to use 2 clips because I find that more successful than a single clip when I do my canning. Anyway, sideline there. Canner has hot water in it because the jars are hot. So hot jars into the hot water. Normal process. Lid goes on, let it vent for 10 minutes, put the weight on, bring it up to 15 pounds of pressure for me because I am above 1,000 feet altitude. And then because these are 1,200 mils, so they are larger than a quart jar, you have to add 20% canning time onto your timing. So anything with chicken and stuff in it, I do for 90 minutes. So anything that has meat in it, I do for 90 minutes, boneless meat. And with the extra size, then you have to put 20% on it, so it's 108 minutes that these can for. It does mean the chicken's pretty full apart when you're eating it, but it's a soup. I'm okay with that. So 108 minutes process, as per usual. Come down off pressure, take the lid off, crack the lid for 5, open the lid, pull them out, let them sit for 24 hours. For dinner, we did stir-fry noodles. I mix up the Recipe Tin Eats Chinese stir-fry sauce. I've mentioned it before, and it's, if you Google Recipe Tin Eats Chinese stir-fry sauce, it comes up. I like to mix it up in a big jar and put the same quantity of water as the sauce in it. That's how we like it. And then I shake up the jar, and then that way I can use that jar on our dishes, in our pans on the sauce. I tend to cook in 2 batches because we don't have a big enough pan. One day I will get a nice big wok. But for the moment, I just cook it in 2 batches, which is fine. And so that means that I have that jar mixed up and I just pour half and half on it, basically. So I mix it all up in the jar, add water, shake it up. I used the rest of the cabbage from breakfast, I think that was only like a little over half a cabbage because I used it for something the other day. I can't remember what now. So used a chunk of cabbage and that was left in the fridge and shredded it all up. And I julienned some carrots using the Thermomix cutter and put them in it as well. You can put any veggies you want in here. This just happens to be what I have and what I need to get used up. We do make it with frozen veggies sometimes too, and which is fine. I just throw the frozen veggies straight in the pan so that they're not soggy. They've still got a bit of crispness to them. And then we use the Aldi noodles, the Hokkien noodles and the Singapore noodles, and I just heat them through. So I boil a kettle, pour boiling water over the top of them, and then separate them with tongs, fork, my hand, whatever. And then so we cook off the chicken, cook off the veggies. I used chicken breast for this because again I have some chicken that needs using in the fridge. Cook off the chicken, cook off the veggies, add the noodles, pour the sauce over it and give it a good mix around until the noodles are nice and glossy and the sauce is coating everything. It doesn't look like I've got any footage of it being served because obviously it just I think I put the whole tray on the table and then the kids serve themselves from the tray, if I remember correctly. But no footage of serving it. When you have help in the kitchen, sometimes it's really hard to remember that you need to get footage of what you're serving. When I'm in there on my own, it's not so bad, but when someone else is helping out with anything, then I find it difficult, and I'm pretty sure Darryl was helping serve that meal. So there you go. So that was today. So not quite all the chicken's done. I think I've got another video tomorrow doing chicken as well. Yes, I'm canning butter chicken, which is something we love having on the shelf. So I'm canning some butter chicken tomorrow, and I think that's the last of the chicken that needs using. And then we're on to the pork. And we've made a few things with the pork, some pulled pork, some nachos, all that sort of stuff. So I will share all that on the next video. So we've probably got 2 or 3 days left to go to share. We've got the food hamper, the A4 community care hamper comes on Saturday, so I will share that. And today I'm going to start making my Rocky Road from scratch. So I'm going to make dairy-free chocolate and some marshmallows and some jellies and things like that and make a slab of Rocky Road, and I hope it works because I didn't really get anything Easter treats for the kids or anything this year. I normally buy them some dairy-free Easter eggs or something just because I can, but they're just so expensive and we were trying to skimp a little bit, so I can make anything I want chocolatey, so it just doesn't have the novelty of the packaging, I suppose. But as I said, we don't really celebrate Easter, it's more just an excuse. So if I can make this Rocky Road, that'll be really nice because it'll be something that I haven't made before, and it has marshmallow and jelly and the chocolate and stuff, so I think that'll be enough of a treat for them anyway. And I'm sure there'll be something that comes in the hamper, though it's probably all dairy based, so probably no good for them, but maybe I'll get a treat. But thank you again for joining me today, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.